Hey everybody, welcome. We're going to begin in just a second. Give me 1 second here. I want to put a comment up and then you guys can see what we're talking about. Sorry, my fingers in your face. I always do that. Oh crap, I got to put the, I got to turn the do not disturb on. There we go. Sorry about that everybody. How's everybody doing? Welcome. It is Serene Sunday, and let me just see here. Hold on just a second. There we go. Done. And let me send it out. There it is. All right. Tonight is Serene Sunday, and we're going to talk about the power of mythology. And in this video, we're going to discuss the power of our mythological world and what that mythological world holds, and present ways to use it in our lives, right? So I'll pin this comment up, for those coming up, and this way you'll know what we're talking about. So tonight we're going to talk about mythology, and to really go into anything very in depth with mythology or anything like with that regard. Would be too much to do in a video, so I'm not going to do that. What I will do is I'm going to talk about what myth means, and how it applies to our everyday life. And we're going to actually talk a little bit more about Irish mythology, but there's all sorts of European mythology. And while a lot of it has been Christianized, I think that our mythology still holds a lot of power. And if you look and dig deep into our mythologies, those stories, right? If you look deep into them, you will see clues of the past, clues of an ancient world, clues of a world that no longer exists, yet exists in the hearts and souls, minds and spirits of men. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about this idea of how cool mythology is and how we could relate it to our own lives. So let's begin. How about we start? We haven't done this in a while. You guys want to start with the Druid's Creed? I think that's appropriate. We'll begin, and this is based. This is based on the Optimist's Creed, and we took it in 2017 and adopted it as the Blessed Order. Druid Order of Blessed Stone and Wood, and I think it's fantastic. So why don't we begin with that, and more people will come in. I promise the kindred, the folk of the Druidhood, and myself to be so strong that nothing can disturb my peace of mind and development of body, to talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person I meet. I don't write living person on that. To make all my friends feel that there is something worthwhile in them, to look at the sunny side of everything and to make my optimism come true. To ponder only the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. To stand just as enthusiastic about the success of others as I am about my own. To forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future. To wear a cheerful countenance at all times and give every living creature I meet a smile. To give so much time to improving myself that I have no time to criticize others. To exist too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to permit the presence of trouble. To think well of myself, to proclaim this fact to the world, not only in loud word, but also in great deed. To live in the faith that the whole world is on my side so long as I am true to the best that is in me. To honor my procrastination, not as an excuse for due time, but as waiting on the right time to execute action from virtue. To know that my heart, soul, mind, and spirit are in sync with kindred only when I am genuine with their comprehensive truth. To abide unmovable in my ethics, worshiping God, doing all good, and remaining brave against those who oppose me, and steadfast with those who support me. To grasp excellence as mastering a concept not by knowing few ideas of many subjects, but by comprehending and practicing many ideas, creating the sum of that subject. Tonight we're going to be using two books. We're going to use Over 9 Waves by Marie Heaney, and that's Heaney. And we're also going to use a book entitled The Druid Code, Magic, Megaliths, and Mythology. The Druid Code by Thomas Sheridan. So, I want to begin by talking a little bit about this concept of myth versus reality, and that myth and reality are the same. We have gotten away from this principle. A lot of people think, well, if you say that you're living in myth or the mythological world, or you believe in the myth, or you believe in it in any sort of way, shape, or form, that you're living in a magical world that's not real. And I have this to say about that. I truly believe in all of the mythologies. I believe in it. I truly agree that this idea of mythology is something that's so very real that our real world doesn't actually even come close to the great detail, the great attention, the great perseverance, and the great focus put into these stories, that what has happened over time is that the world we live in is no longer real. And the world we live in, I truly believe, is the real world, the REEL world, and not the real world, the REAL world. And I believe that that REAL world is the world of mythology. Because that world of mythology has not been corrupted in any way. That world of mythology has sustained, and even though it continued the test of time, and even though that throughout this period and all of the mythological cycles that we learn about, in especially even in Irish mythology, I would say, but all any and all European mythologies have their own cycles, right? These tell stories of things that I believe actually happened. Now, a lot of people would say, well, Druid Nicholas, do you truly believe that they happened the way they were written? Do you truly believe that they were magical? Do you believe that, when we talk about the great worms, the idea of WYRMS, the great worm, when we talk about these things, do you really believe that they happened in that way? Or do you believe that they are sort of archetypal in a way, that they stand for things? And I would say that every tale, every mythology, every mythos, every story that we learn is according even to Mircea Eliade, that even to him, that these stories are true. These stories are true accounts. And when you go back and you look into mythology as work, you know that the word mythos comes from a true account. That's what has been perverted in our real world, our EEL world, that we're trained, that in the so-called real world, REAL world, we're trained that mythology never happened, that it was all fake, that it was a story just made up. It was to tell to children. No. These stories that have been recorded and preserved, even though they may have that Christian spin on them, and if preserved in even a truer sense, a purer sense, have been preserved without any, in the truest pre-Christian sense, in the way the story was written, in the way that the story should have occurred, we learn that these stories did occur, and we need to take them so much more seriously, because these stories have power. They have a lot of power. They have power that even in their perverted sense, and when I say perverted, I simply mean changed. Even in their changed sense, you can still see evidence of the past. You can still see points where you look at that story and you say, wow. I think that when we deal with the mythological cycles, and I'm going to use an example tonight, just for example, Irish mythology, and you have, the four pre-Christian cycles, and then you have the stories of the Christian cycles, the works of W.B. Yeats, where he talks about priests eradicating, wicked witches, in a sense of bad witches, if you will, but that these are stories still that have roots in older storylines, and have been passed down, and have been passed down, and have been passed down, not only orally, but also by word and in deed. So what I want to do is I want to read to you the foreword in this book here, which is the Over 9 Waves, a book of Irish legends by Marie Heaney. It begins and it says this, okay? Give me a second. You guys know I'm blind here. Blind as a bat. Some of the stories retold in this book are among the oldest in Europe. They belong to a culture and language with a long, unbroken, and highly elaborated oral tradition, one of the most venerable in Western Europe. There are two main reasons why these legends have survived from such an early time. The first is that the Romans did not invade Ireland, okay? She writes, because of this, the spoken language was largely unaffected by the Latin, which in countries under Roman rule replaced or marginalized the indigenous language. Okay? Now, the second, she writes, is that the Irish were among the first peoples outside of the Roman Empire to develop the art of writing. But even before they learnt the Roman alphabet and evolved their own script, they were already in possession of a rich store of native learning which had been preserved by the strong oral tradition in Irish society. This body of knowledge had been maintained by the Druidic schools. Now, the Druidic schools were called colleges. It's the closest word we have to what they would have been called, okay? And when the technique of writing came to Ireland with Christianity, the scribes in the early monastic settlements wrote down not only sacred texts in Latin, but the stories they were familiar with in their Irish vernacular. Vernacular just simply means language. The language of the time. We speak in the vernacular, the language of our time. Now, knowing that, we need to point out a couple of things. That Irish mythology, and even, and I hate actually even saying Celtic mythology, because when we talk about Celtic mythology versus Irish mythology, at least when we talk about Irish mythology, we're talking about a specific area of a specific people. But when we talk about Celtic mythology, we're talking about this idea that really spans a whole continent, if not more than one. And so we start moving into, modern day Turkey, and we start, moving into northern Italy. There's Spain. So all of these people, okay, while we call them Celtic, all right, I think it would be better to identify the specific race of people than like a group, I would say, or like the Celts, who spanned across Europe and beyond. So my point is that if we narrow in and say, well, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Irish mythology, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about Scottish mythology, these stories do change from place to place. And it isn't necessarily whether or not these stories were in fact true accounts. It's the true accounts of the people of the time. I want to bring up another point that piggybanks off of Overnight Waves, okay? I want to bring up a point that Thomas Sheridan makes in his book. And that book, again, is The Druid Code by Thomas Sheridan, and it says this. Again, sorry for my blind eyes here. During the period when the famous Ogham, all right, and Ogham or Ogham is Ogham, okay? You don't really pronounce the GH. You do, but it's more of a silent consonant. So during the period when the famous Ogham stone lintels were being placed inside Ireland's entrance to hell, Roman Christian monks were also coming to the realization and understanding of the power of Irish mythology. Listen to that. Coming to the understanding of the power of Irish mythology, being very much alive within the consciousness of the population, and thus they attempted to create their own Christianized versions of the Irish mythological record. Although, once again, it is highly plausible that there may have been secret druids. This is so important. This is so important because what Tom is basically saying is that after Tacitus's report of Anglesey, Tacitus was the Roman historian, right? Where they're all in Anglesey and they're all rustled up like cattle, and the Romans go all around them and they take the Druids, and they say that they eradicate the Druids here, when Really, they didn't. And a lot of people will say the chicken druids. These are the same druids they called the chicken druids because they didn't want. They were afraid to get rounded up by the Romans. They wanted their race to continue. They wanted the Druidic manner to continue, if you will. And so this is a really important point, because the question is whether or not these Druids were the first Irish monks. We still don't know, or whether or not these Irish monks kind of were sympathetic to the Druidic belief and the Druids themselves. As he continues and says this, very much alive within the okay, so he goes on, he says, understanding the power of Irish mythology, very much alive, all right, within the consciousness of the population, and thus they attempted to create their own Christianized versions of Irish mythological record, although once again it is highly plausible that there may have been secret Druids or the clerics with Druidic sympathy, all right, Druidic sympathizers. If not fears, maybe they were just fearful of the Druids and kind of either took them in to hide them or just never gave away their location, making sure that as much Irish mythology and pre-Christian history was retained under the guise of Christian editorialization. So, I mean, there's a lot there, and I think that when we, really reflect on that, what are we reflecting on? We are saying, in a sense, that these mythologies were the pre-Christian scriptures. They were the holy word. They were the holy book. The books. When we talk about whether or not, these stories were preserved through the scrolls or any other way, we know for a fact that even if they were passed on, via oral tradition, we still believe that these stories hold power. So two things. Number one, we talked about Christian colleges earlier, the Druidic, not Christian college, we talked about Druidic colleges, we talked about the schools. What were they teaching in 20 years' time? What were they teaching? What were they doing in that 20-year period where they were training people to be Druids? Well, I believe two things. Number one, they were training Druids to be to not only know the mythology, but know the ethics of the mythology, know the if you will, the dogma of the mythology. I mean, we even hear in the prayers in mythology, especially with the law of correspondence, joint to joint, sinner to sinner, sinner to sinner, joint to joint, that kind of stuff. That means you just go lower and lower and lower in your principle of correspondence, and then go higher and higher and higher back to where you started, forming an alencus, forming a Druid circle in a way. Interesting. So, I think that it is, just, that was an example. If you didn't hear that, that was totally an example of the power of these things hold. Yeah, that was definitely. In almost every episode of mine, you're going to see some kind of magic and witness it, hand, like right there in front of your eyes. I just said a prayer and it interrupted the electricity going, or the waves going from the modem to or the Bluetooth, it was interrupted when I said that, so I'll be careful on what I say in the future. So these are powerful prayers. And I don't know whether or not it's important to say, I don't think you need to take these mythologies and read them in Irish. And they don't say Gaelic in Ireland. They call it Irish. We call it Gaelic, Irish Gaelic here. So anyway, the thing is that I just want you to know that these stories are real. I believe that, and I cannot ever deny that these were the scriptures of the ancients, and that they used these scriptures just as Christian would use the New Testament, or Jewish people would use the Torah, or Islamic people would use the Quran. I think that just as they would use the prayers in these books, the same things that we learn from the gods. And so, as a result, I think that you have a little bit of better understanding of the power these hold. I cannot believe, I am absolutely astonished that just happened. It totally interrupted the connection between the Bluetooth and the bows. How about that? As I said those words. So these things have energy. I am going to say this. When you are reading mythology, especially from a good book that I just showed you, I would definitely, allow yourself to be thrown into it. Learn, a lot of people say, well, who's the god of this, or who's the god of that, or who's the goddess of this, or who's the goddess of that? And I'll always say, or even your patron, so that you could learn who your patron is. I say this: learn their stories, and once you learn their stories, once you learn their stories, you're definitely gonna see that you will develop a more personal relationship with these deities. You're gonna live them. You're gonna feel, and they're awesome. These stories are so great that when you read them, if you literally don't cry, if you don't laugh, if you don't show any emotion, then you're reading it wrong. The first step to reading a good piece of mythology is really go over it before you even read it. Number one, go over it, look at the vocabulary, find out who is who. When you come up with a name and you're like, find out how to say it. Like, Fionn Mick Cum Hal is actually Finn McCool. And so, a lot of these names, even the last name McCleary, right, comes from MacLear, Manana MacLear. So a lot of these names, a lot of the names have been Americanized and Romanized. So, at some point later in time. So I really think that you should, just definitely delve into it. And a lot of people, like I said, would ask me if these stories, do I believe in their literal interpretations, or they're figurative interpretations. I am, to be honest, I think I'm more of a fundamentalist when it comes to polytheism. I believe that these things happened as they were written. I do. I really do. Does that make somebody crazy for believing that? Absolutely not. I think what it does do is it lends definitely a powerful hand to ancient times. Because if we water down ancient times, then guess what? The world we live in is shite. And, you know, as a result of that, I think that it's something we really need to it's something we need to think about, definitely. I want you to think about it this way. Know that whatever you believe, I really think you should put some stock into, you know, I try not to ever tell people what to believe in, because it's not me. I don't care what you believe in, to be quite honest with you. But I think it might behoove you to put a little bit more stock into believing that these mythologies, these mythos, the stories, the true accounts, put that into your, put some stock into that and say, you know what, this really happened. And if you put that into your Druidic tetrachronomy before you, and if you guys know what the Druidic tetrachronomy is, the heart, soul, mind, and spirit, I taught that to you, and I'm actually the one that coined that phrase, the Druidic tetrachronomy. I'm the first one. If you go back and you research it, you'll see, well, it was first coined by the Druid Circle, Druid Nicholas the Clan. I think that when you put your Druidic tetrachronomy into this, you will be a little bit more receptive to the power these mythologies have. So knowing that, I mean, you know, if ever you want a pick-me-up, you know, read these stories. They will engage you and distract you from the modern world. With that, I hope you learned something tonight. A little bit more about mythology and myth and magic, and knowing that magic does happen just like that. If you wanted to, for the beginner, probably not, but you gotta continue to practice just like you would catching a ball. You cannot catch a ball if you do not practice on how to. You cannot ride a bike unless you learn how to. So, with that, thank you so much. I want to give you your Foriero, and that is your Druidic mantra. And that is as follows: I commit myself to mythology. I commit myself to mythology. I commit myself to mythology, so that I may be impressed. Just say that. I commit myself to mythology so that I may be impressed. Those exact words, so that I may be impressed. And you know that the Foriero has to deal with the day and the Ru, the way or ve and the id, and to form the Deru and the weed, and that your magic tonight I don't have to teach, because you're going to find it out when you read everything about the power of mythology. This video, we discussed the power of our mythological world and how it holds that power not just over us, but wants us to be empowered by us, but more importantly, us to be able to, invoke that power, right? Not evoke it. And, we presented ways to use it in our lives. And like I said, every episode, you're always going to see magic. You're going to witness it firsthand. Go back to my videos where, I caused I'll never forget the day that we did an episode where there was no wind. Both flags were down. It was the American flag and the Marine Corps flag. Both flags were down. There was no wind. And I'm like, come on, wind. I'm like, make that flag wave. And I wanted the Marine Corps flag to wave because, as a former Marine, I thought it would be kind of cool to do that. And sometimes even unexpectedly magic occurs, so you know how language works. Language is not simply just oral or written. Language is both. And we need to preserve that, use it, and know that mythology is our best source for magic. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy whatever time it is. Make it great. Here comes your blessing. Wherever you're at, whoever you are, may the gods bless you. May the goddesses keep you. May the mystical shine their light upon you, and may your ancestors remain with you forever and ever. Girawan. Thank you, everyone. Girawan. Toshe fyr. Toshe fyr. Arnit. East. Le Mogui. That I want you to be a better version of you tomorrow than you are today. And it doesn't matter who you are, what gender you are, what color you are, how tall you are, how heavy or you are, what race you are. It doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not you have a genuine and sincere interest in mythology, in the ancient world. And if you do, I promise for a fact, if you do, it will reach to you and you will be drawn to it. It's a two-way street. Thank you for watching.